Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Boro Fan TV and the Monday Night Show with me, James Hutchinson. Got a busy programme this week for your Boro fans as we look back on another 3-point week. Former managers having their say, contract extensions, as well as previewing this week's double-header. Joining me tonight and making his debut on Boro Fan TV is David Campbell. Evening, mate.
Evening, James. You okay?
I'm not too bad, pal. I'm not too bad. Hopefully everything's up and running this week so we can take your feedback and views on this week's show. It's always great to hear your opinions, Boro fans. So, David, without further ado, let's get this show on the road, mate.
Looking forward to it.
We'll start with a good bit first. We'll look back at the Swansea game. Great win for the Boro. And Duncan Watmore, do you think going somewhere to securing a contract for himself beyond January with his 2 goals?
Yeah, you'd like to think so, especially he offers something different to what we've got in the team. You know, he's very direct when he gets the ball, and he works those final thirds very well, gets in between the gaps, which is what we were hoping Roberts would do, but obviously he's not getting his chance. So, you know, we've got him till January, but if he carries on as normal, I can't see why he wouldn't get that contract.
Yeah, that's a good point you made there about Patrick Roberts. I want to bring that up as well, David. There's been some suggestions in some areas that maybe Watmore may get a contract in January at the expense of Patrick Roberts, who we may send back to Man City. What do you think of that train of thought?
I mean, I could see it happening, but we would have to get another replacement in to give us another option, because at the moment, they're the only 2 players I would say are direct for us. You know, we've got Tavernier, but I wouldn't say he's a direct player. I'd say he's more of a link-up man. So Roberts and Watmore, if you're going to take Roberts back, you're going to have to get a couple of wide players in there.
In terms of Watmore, do you think he just, like you mentioned earlier on, he just suits our system more because he does get around the pitch? I mean, his work rate was incredible in that first hour against Swansea. And do you think Neil Warnock sees more in him in terms of what he offers to the team than he does with Patrick Roberts?
Definitely. We all know Warnock likes workhorses, and Roberts, obviously, he hasn't been given the chance, but you're not going to see him track back 40 yards to put a tackle in or harass the defender, where Watmore will do that. And I think that's why he is choosing to play Watmore over Roberts.
Yeah, fair point, pal. I mean, there was another immense display from the Boro, I thought. I think arguably the best performance of the season so far. And there was a number of players, but for me, another man that stood out on the night, Mark Bowler. I mean, what have you made of his transformation this season, David?
Second to none, isn't it, compared to where he was when we signed him? I remember watching him in the pre-season game when we first signed him, and he just looked totally out of his depth. I must say, when I seen him playing left centre-back against Swansea, I was thinking, oh, what are we doing here? But he stood up and he kept Andre Ayew, extremely quiet. You know, and he's probably the biggest threat in the league, I'd say. Yeah,
that's a good point. Just going back to the Patrick Roberts thing, Kevin Short's been in touch. Great to hear from you again, Kev. Hope you're well, pal. He said it would be a big risk letting Roberts go. Not sure if we could get anyone of better quality with the current budget we've got. It's a fair point. It's a difficult one to sum up in a way, David. But do you think Patrick Roberts, for all the hype that surrounded him when he came here from Man City and what he did say at Celtic before he came here, do you think he's lived up to that hype, or have you maybe been a little bit disappointed with his output and what he's done while he's been in the club, or do you think circumstances have worked against him a little bit?
I think circumstances have worked against him, because when he signed in the January, when we played Birmingham at home and he won the penalty, before that he was just unplayable, and then he picked up that injury, and then that was more or less the season written off for him. And then he came back, obviously, because of the COVID, and I think he started well. I think you've got to play a certain formation to get Roberts in there.
Yeah.
And because we play very rigidly, I can't see how he's going to fit into a Warnock team. I think Warnock more got him in just to have an extra body and to create something if we needed it.
Yeah. No, I think you're spot on there. And Joe Scott, thanks for getting in touch, Joe. He said the same there about Roberts doesn't seem to fit in the current system. And I go along with what you're saying there about it's another body, and he's a good player, and maybe as an impact player at times off the bench. But I'm sure Patrick Roberts hasn't come from Man City to Middlesbrough on loan to be an impact player off the bench, has he?
No, I completely agree. I think looking at his body language, I think you can obviously see he was unhappy. I mean, when he came on against Stoke, we just didn't give him the ball. And for someone you're wanting to make an impact, for me, you've just got to feed him. And we were just trying diagonal balls and long balls, which doesn't suit his game.
Yeah. I mean, going back to the Swansea game, for me, what stood out not only was the performance, David, it was in terms of like the character we showed after a disappointing defeat at Huddersfield on the Saturday before. And again, we beat another team who were much lauded before the game, a side that many people are seen as going to be challenging at the top. But is it now time that maybe Boro fans themselves start to think, do you know what, maybe all these teams that we've been beaten this season so far were much fancied. Maybe we're one of the teams to be fancied this season.
Yeah, I mean, you could quietly argue that the league is the most open it's been in a long time. Everybody seems to be getting results or grinding results out against each other. And I thought we just outfought Swansea. And in a team who's supposed to be so good in possession, I felt we were dominant really throughout the game. So, and even Norwich. So, I think there isn't a team we should be frightened to play. Like you say, it should be the opposite really, because we're so rigid. Teams should fear playing us. Yeah,
no, great points, mate. I mean, Warnock's assessment after the game, David, was that this was his best win during his spell as Boro manager. I mean, that's some statement to make, but do you agree with what he said?
From domination throughout the game and who we were up against, you would have to say he's got a strong case for that. Yeah. I mean, Derby, a part of going through the problems that Derby are going through. Derby was an excellent performance as well, but I just think when you looked at, we had no Dyke Steele against Swansea and what have you. We stood up throughout the whole team.
Yeah. No, it's a good shout. And there was one or two grumbles after the game. We were talking before we came on air tonight about Marcus Tavernier, and he sort of seems to divide opinion amongst Boro fans. And there was a few grumbles directed towards him regarding his performance against Swansea. And again, we'll talk about the Stoke game in a little bit. But again, on Saturday after that, again, there was a few comments about his performance. What's your take on Marcus Tavernier?
I think the problem with Marcus Tavernier is we just don't know what position he is at the moment. Is he a centre midfielder? Is he a 9 or is he 10? Is he a winger? What you see is what you get, though. He will put a shift in throughout the pitch, and his work rate from first minute to last minute is unbelievable. It's just that final ball. He flatters to deceive, whether it's a through ball, a shot, his free kicks, it's his decision making. And I think that's what lets him down. Yeah.
And do you think Warnock can accept that? Because we also mentioned there's been a couple of games. He did it in the Swansea match. He did it against Coventry a few weeks earlier, where he made crucial interceptions in our own penalty area. And like you say, 100% work rate throughout every game. But like you say, at the other end of the pitch, sometimes his decision-making leaves a little bit to be desired.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you're going to get that from box to box, aren't you, with him? So, when we do go rigid and go 10 men behind the ball, he could easily be that number 10 who counters attacks as well as breaks up the play. So I think that's why we're using him. But I just feel like we're using him as our only attacking outlet. And I think that's a bit unfair. The fans judge him because we're judging him on an attacking outlet, where I think Tavernier offers more than that. I think he's a whole all-round player.
Yeah. Matthew Gross, thanks for getting in touch, Matthew, regular on the show. He's saying we have to find a way of fitting in Roberts. He offers so much, but he doesn't get the opportunity to show it. He's got pace, creativity, and he's not scared to get at plays. He's got everything we lack. And that's part of the problem in the way, isn't it, David?
Yeah, I couldn't agree.
He's somebody that people say, yeah, look at what he can do. But do you think maybe on the other hand, Neil Warnock looks and says, well, yeah, if I put him in the team, we become a lot more open and susceptible to attacks from other sides?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, James. I mean, looking at when we played Brentford away, Cardiff away, Blackburn away, and there's 20 minutes to go, you could argue, get Roberts on now because the game's more open. But to start with, if you go 1-0 down with Roberts, I think you're asking a bit too much because, he has got the ability to beat people, but he does lose position quite a lot. And Warnock, that's one thing we know under Warnock, he doesn't accept.
Yeah. Dorry on tour, Forest fan, struggling a bit at the minute, mate. I know you are, but he said Forest fan, and he said Boro finished third. So there you go. It's interesting what fans of other clubs think. They seem to see. Do you think that's maybe the Neil Warnock factor there, possibly, David?
Oh, completely. I mean, I've got a Norwich, a friend who's a Norwich fan, and he's saying he thinks the best performance he's seen against them this year through organisation is us. Right. So, you know, I know they beat us, but it could have been quite different on the day. Yeah, I think anybody can beat anybody. So I think third, you know, why not be realistic? Why not go for the top two?
Yeah, confident and bold shout that, mate. Before we move on to the Swansea game, we started with Chuba Akpom that night. And again, I think I'll talk a little bit further on in the show about the centre-forward situation. But out of the current two at the moment, Akpom and Asombalonga, who do you think's the number one striker at the club? Or do you think it really matters anyway? But who do you think probably is the main man in possession?
Yeah, I think you've answered the question there. I mean, it's a strange one for me, that, James, because he started the season as a two-man striker. And then quickly, because of Fletcher's injury, he came away from it. So I think realistically, he does want to play that two strikers. And now we've signed Watmore, I don't know why he doesn't refer back to it. I don't think there's a lot between Akpom and Britt. I think they're both workhorses. And I know Boro fans are quick to judge on them because of the goal scoring, but we simply don't create enough for the strikers to judge them on that, in my opinion.
Yeah. I think it's got to be about what they bring to the side as a whole, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because you're not going to get a stack of chances playing in our team at the moment. But
without a doubt.
Yeah. Ruth Dixon has got in touch with us. Thanks for watching the show, Ruth. With Paddy close to his yellow card limit, would you risk resting him for one of the 3 games before the 17th of December? It's a big shout because he brings so much to the side, but then again, could you then afford to lose him for a game after that? Or do you think the games after the 17th, the games that we could win without McNair?
Yeah, I don't think you can work it like that because, you know, he could get a straight red. You know, and that rules you out for 3 games. So resting one game, it swings and roundabouts. I think if you're going to rest him, you need to wait for Dijksteel to be back against Millwall.
Yeah.
Because it's obviously doesn't look like a flat back four away from home at the moment. So for tomorrow night, I can't see McNair not starting.
Yeah. No, I could wait. And you must have been pleased to see him sign a 2-year contract extension last week as well, David.
He's been unbelievable, hasn't he? He's so versatile. I mean, even under Tony Pulis when he was playing centre midfield, I thought we had a player on our hands. But he's gone beyond this season. He looks like a leader. Yeah.
No, he has. He's grown in stature. He definitely has. Gareth Jones is just responding to a few of the things we've been chatting about tonight. Nice to have you on board, Gareth. He said, I think we need a few more bodies in before we can get excited about a promotion push. Really need a striker that needs to start scoring some goals. And I think that's a fair point you make, Gareth. My only thing in that, in a way, is it's the type of striker I think we need. And I think we sort of missed the boat in the summer, didn't we, when we couldn't get a player such as Kiefer Moore, didn't we, David?
Yeah. The way we set up with Spence and Johnson left as fullbacks, if we're going to get crosses in, you need that target man, don't you?
Yeah.
And at the moment, our striker's too isolated. You know, I think a pacey striker would have been good as well. You know, someone who splits the defence in between. You know, when I see Chuba Akpom and Britt, they come short and it's getting to the chest. I'd rather see them run in behind, and we just aren't playing that way. Yeah.
Do you ever think you'll see Neil Warnock set up with 2 up front as a partnership this season, or do you think it'd be very rare that you see that?
I think, like I say, he started the season with that, so I'd like to think he'd refer back to that. But unless you get Fletcher back or he brings another striker in, I can't see it. I don't think he wants to take that risk if he starts with a 2 and one of them gets injured, or he's limited on options. So I can understand why he's doing it. But I just think if you're a bit more braver and you're drawing these games with 20 minutes to go, why not put 2 of them up top together? There's too many times this season where we've took Britt on and brought Chuba off, or vice versa, and it's just fresh legs for me.
Yeah. It doesn't change anything. Oh, we're still there, David. Looks like we've lost you for a moment there. Hopefully we'll get you back on soon. A few other comments coming in from some of the viewers here now. But Paul Williams, Championship is a poor league this season, and it's understandable given current climates. And I take on board what you're saying there, Paul. Obviously, finances aren't great for a lot of clubs, and they're not willing to splash the cash out because they haven't got a great deal of money spare at the moment. They're just trying to cover the costs. So it will be difficult for a lot of sides this season to maybe make ends meet and maybe push the boat out. And it's not a risk worth taking. But, yeah, take on board what you're saying. And we've also got Joe Scott again getting in touch with us. Joe's mentioned there, as I'd said before, I'd rather see a Sombalonga and Akpom playing together rather than having a number 10 playing behind the striker. And I think a lot of Boro fans certainly feel that way, Joe. In a number of games, I think Boro fans would rather maybe see us go with two up top rather than just the one. But unfortunately, I think it's dictated to by who our opposition are, who we're playing against. But certainly, I think in maybe some games in the next month or so, we may see two men up front. But as David said when he was with us earlier on in the show, he mentioned there, it's difficult to have two men strikers playing week in, week out when you've only got two strikers on board at the club. Hopefully, we've got David back with us now. You all right there, David?
Oh, yeah, sorry. I think one of the kids pulled the router out.
Don't worry about that, mate. We've had those problems before, so don't worry about that. It's great to have you back on board with us. Just been mentioning there about the striker situation and the league as a whole in terms of what people's expectations are this season. We mentioned there about Neil Warnock. We've also had a few other former Boro managers getting saying their piece during the week. First of all, we had Jonathan Woodgate, who spoke about his exit, referring to his belief that he needed a little bit more time and that around half of the fans at the club were against his appointment. Were those comments ones that surprised you, David?
No. I think he loves the Boro as much as we do, and I think he knew what the Boro fans' expectations were. Who's going to turn the job down if you're Warner, if you Woodgate?
Yeah,
I just feel like he needed someone like Warner alongside him, and I can see what he's saying regarding the support financially, but he knew what he was getting into before he took the job, because we started the rebuild process long before him. Yeah. So I think it was a bit of a cop-out to turn around and say he wasn't financially supported because he knew that going into the job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the 60-40%, or he was saying 50-50, how could he expect anything different? You know, from going from one extreme to the other, we were going from an experienced manager who's been there, done it all, to a rookie manager who'd never been there. So even if it wasn't Woodgate, it was then when we appointed McLaren all those years ago and he was number two, the fan base was still split on that decision. So I don't think you can blame the fans because we've been there as fans before. You know.
No, like I said, Gareth Jones saying, I think it was more than half, to be fair. Gareth, I'll be honest, I'm with you on that. I think there was a lot of fans, and it certainly wasn't anything personal, but I just think a lot of Boro fans had reservations when that appointment was made because it just came at the wrong time. It just seems as though all the wrong things came together at the same time, and cost cutting at the club, cutting down on the squad, and it was a hell of a hard gig for a first manager to get that job at that time, and I think it was pretty much a thankless task. But like you said, David, it wasn't one he was ever going to turn down, was it?
No, and I think what didn't help is his philosophy changed. You know, we all said we're going to see attacking, pressing football, and he said it on his Jamie Carragher podcast. Against Salford, he realised in the pre-season that we didn't have the players to do pressing football. Yeah. So we all were given this expectation we're going to see this and this, and he reverted straight back from it.
Yeah.
And so any fans who were on board thinking, oh, this is going to be a new change, were quickly disappointed.
Yeah. Kev Short's got in touch again there. He's saying about Woodgate, he just wasn't ready for it, and the finances shouldn't really have been as big an issue for it to have, was working with youth. The difference between the two Swansea results justifies getting rid of him. And I think that's it. When you look back at the timing of when he left, I don't think Steve Gibson could have waited any longer before making that decision, because we really were close to taking the drop last season, weren't we?
100%. I mean, the only thing that did surprise me is he waited for one game after COVID to make that change, where he could have made, I know we weren't training, but he could have made the change during the break.
Yeah.
And then, Warnock could have spoke to the players of what he expected. I think it was just a little bit rushed.
Yeah. And talking of his predecessor there, Tony Pulis, he's also had his 2 pennyworth this week, David. He mentioned there about hoping that Boro fans have maybe reassessed his time at the Riverside and giving him credit for his work in terms of how he financially stabilised the club. What's your thoughts on that one, David?
Well, he did. We did cut the cloth accordingly. Unfortunately, performances dipped because of that, because he just made us out hard to beat. Pulis won't get the recognition he wants at the Borough because of his philosophy on the way he played football. West Brom fans exactly the same. He divided opinions, but the stuff he did behind the scenes, from what I know, is he did a lot of work which has gone unnoticed.
It's almost like a necessary evil, wasn't it, in a way that somebody had to take those decisions and make them and cut back on the squad. And yes, Borough fans might look and say, oh, well, we lost Patrick Bamford for £6 million and look what he's gone on to achieve and so on. But players had to be moved on because we couldn't sustain the squad at the level that it was at, could we?
I think it was the highest bidder for whoever was going to go. Yeah, fans might have wanted such and Traore to stay, but we couldn't really be choosy. If we got given a price and it was acceptable, we had to take it. And Pulis was very open with that in his conferences. He was saying, we have to justify costs. The fans knew what it was about. But when you start seeing 7 million getting spent on Saville, and he at the same point he's saying we need to cut cloths, that's where fans start, and deservedly so, start questioning some of the comments he's making. Yeah.
We'll talk to Tony Pulis. One of his former clubs was Stoke City. We went to the Potteries at the weekend. After the highs of the season so far against Swansea, cold water was literally poured on Boro's Day as a poor performance saw them lose 1-0 at Stoke. Before we get on to Cabin Gate, what did you think of our display on Saturday, which contrasted so much from the one on Wednesday night against Swansea?
Yeah, it was chalk and cheese, wasn't it? I mean, Stoke are a very rigid team, similar to us. And as soon as we went 1-0 down, and with our starting lineup, I couldn't see how we were going to get back into it unless it came through the substitutions. But it was the first time under Warnock I could say we've been second best throughout the game. So that just shows how far we've come, I would suppose. Yeah.
I mean, we spoke a week ago on the show about the Huddersfield game and that being the first below par performance of the season. And I think arguably Saturday topped that. Do you think it's almost inevitable, David, as a consequence of the games coming so quickly and the size of the squad we have, or do you think steps could have been taken to avoid these sort of performances?
It's hard to say. I mean, everybody has off days. I mean, when we played Huddersfield, I don't think we were well beaten because we should have been 3-0 up in the first 30 minutes. And the weather conditions, and I just think the way we set up from Stoke was very negative considering the performance we just had against Swansea. I know it was only one change, but I can't see how we didn't start with Watmore. I don't believe on a player who's scored 2 doesn't keep his place. He's full of confidence and the team's confidence, and then suddenly you go very rigid. Yeah.
Just going to flip back to the Tony Pulis and the Patrick Bamford situation there. David Jackson's got in touch with us and said selling Bamford was a major error. Patrick should have been made our number 9 and Britt should have been unloaded or offloaded. And Ruth Dixon's also got in touch there, and Ruth said it's even more painful when Bamford was mostly played out of position. Curse of the strikers, we played on the wing, we'll come back and bite us on the bum. And I mean, as Leeds fans were giving Bamford a hard time last season, even though they got promoted. He was getting a lot of stick off Leeds fans last season in their championship winning season. Yet this year in the Premier League, he looks a fantastic player, doesn't he?
Yeah, and I think it was similar to when we bought him in the January under Cranker. He couldn't get in the team, and then before Pulis came in as well, he wasn't hitting the great heights. And then when Pulis came in, he had that unbelievable finish. But no, I don't think any Boro fan wanted to see Patrick Bamford leave the club. You know, he obviously cared for the club, and it was the wrong player to go, but he was the highest bidder, and I just don't think we had a choice regarding it.
Going back to Saturday, we're going to have to go on to it now. Most of the headlines after the game, David, refer to the conditions in Boro's pigsty. Porter cabin. Do you think the comments were employed by the gaffer to maybe deflect attention away from the performance?
I would say so. It's a typical Neil Warnock comment. It'd have been like we were speaking off air before, and it'd have been interesting to see if he'd have said it if we won. And similar when we beat them last season, it was under COVID restrictions. Were the protocols the same then? Were we in a porter cabin with a leaking roof? You know, we just don't know.
Did anyone from that game on Saturday emerge with any credit for you, David?
No, not for me. No, I wouldn't say so. I don't think Marvin Johnson, he flatters to deceive, doesn't he, at times? And he was getting in good positions, but his final ball was poor. Yeah, which is hard to say this season because I think he has been better.
He has, yeah. He's contributed an awful lot, hasn't he? When he's been not only with the goals, but like you say, some of his deliveries have been fantastic. But that just seemed to go awry a bit on Saturday. What about Marcus Bettinelli? I know he's another one that's come in for a little bit of criticism, but he helped keep the score down on Saturday. What have you made of Bettinelli since he's joined the club?
He's solid, isn't he? And he's a massive upgrade on what we've had since Randolph. You know, he is the communication we need. It's hard to judge our keepers because when you put 10 men behind the ball and we're not having loads of shots on our goal, it is hard to judge a keeper, but it's communication. The defenders seem to put a lot of trust in him. And having Dyke, Steele, McNair, Bowler, who aren't predominantly centre-halves, he's obviously putting confidence in them in the back, which is reassuring. Yeah.
Matthew Groves got in touch again there, just going back to the Patrick Bamford situation. Hindsight's a great thing. If we rejected the 7 million, knowing our circumstances at the time, we would have slated the club for it. Let's be honest, we got a good price for Bamford. And it's a fair point, Matthew. It just like you say, with hindsight now, it seemed as though we maybe undersold things. But for a player that probably wasn't going to be first choice under Pulis, it was a decent amount of money. There's a few other people getting in touch as well, David, about Saturday. And people that performed for us, Joe Scott there saying maybe Saville was our best player. And then Ruth Dixon again, thinking that Bowler was decent too. It's been another 3-point week for us, as it was the week before. So we remain in 10th position, David. We're just 3 points outside the playoff places. Do you honestly think the playoffs are a realistic target for us this season? I know you mentioned earlier in the show about maybe top 2, but do you think we really can make a go of making top 6 this year?
I can't see why not. I think we've got to aim that because the league is so far open. I mean, the top 2, it could be unrealistic, but with a few good additions, why not? And if we have those few good additions, then we should definitely be looking for that top 6. You know, we're solid enough. We're going to draw or win more games than we're going to lose this season. So why not look at those top 6 places?
No, I like your optimism, pal. I like it. Kev Short's got in touch there with regards to Bettinelli, and he said he's got a friend who's a Fulham fan and he'd be happy if he stayed permanently. So I don't know if his friend is happy to get rid of Bettinelli and he wants him to stay up here, or Kev himself is happy for him to come up here. But like you say, I think he is an upgrade on what we've had in recent seasons. So certainly since Randolph left. So hopefully we will maybe see Bettinelli stay beyond January. And Chris Sykes, thanks for watching, Chris. If we spend wisely in January, you never know. And it's an interesting question, that, isn't it? Because it's always a difficult time, the January transfer window, for getting good deals done. And no doubt we'll be trying to sign Yannick Bolasie for about the 4th and 5th time again in January. But it's something you've got to be really careful with, that you don't overstretch yourself, but you've got to show that little bit of ambition to maybe push yourself over the line.
Yeah, and I can't see us spending great money. You know, he is going to be looking for loans, and Grzycki or Bolasie, I think it only needs that little tweaks, our team. You could argue maybe a centre half now. We've had Hall ruled out for the majority of the season, which comes as a blow. But I think it's just in that final third, we just need a few more additions and then we can start looking up.
Yeah, great points, mate. Going to look ahead now to this week's games. Our doubleheader this week's Preston and Millwall. So Wednesday, we head over to Preston, hoping to bounce back. Amazing stat with them. 6 out of their 8 games at home this season they've lost, David. But I think it'd be wrong to assume it's going to be a walk in the park there, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, Preston are a good team, aren't they? I know they're having the problems at home, but they've got players like Johnson and Brown and Barkhausen who can win games by themselves. I think we're going to have to go there and be very rigid and be very solid to stop them creating chances, because they're not direct, but they create chances from all over the pitch.
Yeah. And Alex Neil, the manager there, he regularly gets the most out of that squad there. I think they've got one of the lowest budgets in the Championship, yet they regularly do well. They always seem to be a top 10 side. What's your prediction for Wednesday night, David? What do you reckon the score's going to be down at Deepdale?
I think it's going to... I'd love to say Boro grind out 1-0 win, but I can see a draw. I would happily take a draw if you ask me now. And then if we can go on to Millwall at home, get 3 points there, you'd have to say out of the 4 games, it's been a successful turn.
Yeah. We ask this question every week now when it's the 2-game weeks, and I think a lot of people are saying if you can get 4 points from your 2 games, it's a really good week for you, because it's hard to back it up so close together and get 2 positive results. So I'm with you there. I think if we get 4 points or more from this week, it'll have been a good week.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, like Millwall, like you said, this Saturday, and they're always close encounters when we play the Lions, and I don't think there's any reason to believe it'll be any different this weekend, is it?
No, you know what you're going to get with a Millwall side. They're very direct, but that suits us really. If we can compact their midfields and get on top of them, it's a battle of midfields when you're playing Millwall. So they're beatable, aren't they?
Yeah. And that's not like putting them down or anything like that, but I think most Boro fans will be hoping that we can get at least 4 points this week. Or do you think we're maybe being a little bit disrespectful to our opponents?
No, I think that just shows the expectation of where we've come from last season, to be honest with you, James. I mean, I don't think we should be fearing anyone. You look at the teams when we played Brentford away from home. I was going into that game thinking, we've got players playing out of position. And we just didn't look like a team that was struggled against them. They didn't create many clear-cut chances. So why not go into confidence with teams like Preston? I would be more worried if we were going into them and not expecting a result like we were last season.
Yeah. So give us a prediction for Millwall. You've gone for a draw against Preston. What's your hopes for Saturday in Millwall at the Riverside, mate?
I think we'll beat them. Probably, I don't know. It depends on the formation, but I'd like to see us attack them and win 2-0.
Good man. I'll go 2-1 on that one. But yeah, I'm pretty much with you there. I'll take a draw, Preston, beat Millwall, and I think if we get 4 points, that'll keep us on the coattails of the top 6 and hanging about there, which I think is as much as we can be expecting between now and January. And if we're there or thereabouts, January transfer window could be a really exciting end of the season for Boro this year, couldn't it, David?
And James, and that's exactly what he said, hasn't he? He said, I want to keep us within touching distance until January.
Yeah.
And I think that he has set that bar to the players, and as fans, we need to be realistic with that. Yeah,
fair point, mate. David, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show tonight. You've made a fantastic debut, and hope to see you again soon. It's been really good to have you on board. You enjoyed it, mate?
Yeah, loved it. If you ever need us again, give us a shout.
Fantastic, mate. Thank you to David. Thank you to everybody out there that's watched tonight and for all your comments. It's been great to hear from you all. It's much appreciated. Keep an eye out for Joe Scott's previews of this week's games against Preston and Millwall and all the other content on Boro Fan TV. From me, James Hutchinson, and David Campbell here on Boro Fan TV tonight. Good night, have a good week, and up the Boro.
Up Boro.